Welcome to Real Life Mentoring, where we explore real life issues to help you make an authentic difference in the world.
Hi, it's Christina here, and Chris, you're here. You want to say hello?
I am here, and we're here with our friend Leah Gatlin today.
Yeah, so I'm going to introduce you to her. Leah and I have known each other now for, I don't know.
4.5 years.
4.5 years. I'm not good with numbers. And so we talk about mentoring and what it looks like. And so we thought, we'll have, Leah is someone that I mentor, and we're going to talk about how that began, how that developed, what it looks like now. Yeah.
And then I can explain how I know it was 4.5 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, well tell us, how do you know it was 4.5 years ago?
How do you know it was 4.5 years ago?
So when I started working at my current job at a local church, like 2 weeks into my job in September, we hosted a women's conference.
Oh.
And I went to it, maybe slightly begrudgingly. And they also did the thing that I thought was so crazy and stupid, honestly.
Yeah.
But
By the way, I don't like that word, stupid.
So
something so not fun for me.
Yeah.
And they would have women get up and share at the end of the sessions what they had been learning or what really spoke to them. And on Saturday morning, you got up because you never met a microphone you didn't want to take. Same for me. And I literally have no recollection of what you said.
I don't
Zero.
either. I don't even remember this.
Except I remember as you were speaking, I thought, I want to know her. So then over the course of the next, the fall, I would see you and I would remember, I want to know her. And I hadn't been mentored in a while and have an interesting history. Anyway, so finally one time I thought, there's one way to solve this. And that is to say, hey, Christina, can we get coffee? And so we stood there and I said, Christina, could we get coffee? And then, do you remember our first coffee?
I do. I want you to tell it because then I'll tell my version.
So we go to a local pastry shop. The first thing I remember is you were horrified at the prices of the pastries. Because you'd lived in Europe and all of these things would be half the price.
Right, yeah.
So, and we sat down and I think I told you an absurdly long version of like my history.
Yeah.
Shocking, right?
Very, very shocking. And you told me a little bit of your story. You also brought me like the report from Fahrenheit.
Okay.
And you brought me like a baking mix or something because you said, I like to give presents. And I thought, well, I like to get presents.
Well, clarify Fahrenheit if no one's ever heard this podcast.
Oh, yes. Before. So Fahrenheit is the mentor making organization that Chris and Christina lead.
Right, that's our nonprofit.
Yeah.
I don't remember doing any of that.
Right. So, but then,
oh gosh,
really like the crowning moment to me, and this is so Christina.
I'm a little bit frightened.
We're sitting there and you're talking and you go, well, which I have since learned, always listen to what comes after well. You said, well, you take some time and pray about it too, but God's already told me that I'm going to mentor you. And I thought...
Do you remember that?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which I remember thinking, well, I hope he tells me yes. Otherwise, that's a really awkward conversation. So, but I was like, well, I really like her. And so... That's how that began.
I love that perspective, but from my perspective, I'm always on the lookout for young women who...
Oh, you thought I was young.
I thought you were young. You are young. She is young if you're listening. But I'm always on the lookout and I want to pay attention. But a personal boundary is I can't mentor 5-6 different... I want to really, like pour into a couple of girls at a time. And when you came... I thought, okay, Lord, is this just coffee? Because I knew you worked at the church as well. Maybe that's why I brought the Fahrenheit thing. I don't know. But I had already began praying from the time you asked me until the time we first met. And I felt like the Lord, because I knew a little bit about what you did. And I thought, my goodness, she is giving her life away. you are the kind of person I want to pour my life into. And so the Lord had already told me, like I didn't hear an audible voice, but it was like, okay, yeah, she's somebody, if she's up for it, that I want you to pursue. So maybe I should have said that and gave you a caveat to say, and if it's not okay for you, but yeah.
No, the way you said it was so perfect. And it's like one of my favorite stories about you or about us.
That's good. So that's a great illustration of a first meeting. Yeah. So why were you looking for a mentor? Had you been mentored before? What were you looking for? What was the need, I guess?
So I had been mentored before, but always by people within 2 years of my own age. So, and it was
Not
great.
somebody older.
Right. Older.
Shut it.
And I think I just, in that season too, well, honestly, I think the Lord knew what I needed because also right about the time you started mentoring me, my sister got cancer. My mom had back surgery. Like my family was just sort of going through this, going through this crisis where I really also kind of needed to be mothered. And at the time, I think I was super lonely. And, again, since you all say you're unashamedly Christian, the Bible says that God puts the lonely in families. And so I think I was on the lookout for who is a family that I like, that I could be a part of.
Yeah. And then you met Chris.
Right. Remember, I told the first time I met Chris, like for real, and I said, "You seem like such a scholarly, like professor type."
And we laughed out loud.
I laughed as well because
I don't think I've ever been so wrong about a person. Like usually I'm a pretty good judge of I could judge your character, but anyway, and so
I'm a man of many moods.
Right? Oh. And so I knew I wanted somebody. The one thing that I really needed was consistency, which consistency could have been every 2 weeks, every 3, like whatever.
And we talked about that at the beginning.
Yeah. And I think I said, because you were really good about once I said yes, about you asking me my expectations. And I said, I need consistency. It doesn't have to be the same day every time, but I need consistency.
Yeah.
And I need a safe place because also it can be hard for some people. Well, it's hard for me because I work at a church.
Yeah.
And so, and most of my friends, especially at the time, go to the church where I work.
Right.
So I tell people, I'm like, your normal daily struggles that you have at work happen to me. You just happen to go to church where I work.
Right.
So,
yeah.
And I had heard your story about being on staff. So I knew you understood some of the intricacies. And also I could tell you that I was really frustrated with our pastor for whatever reason. And you weren't going to leave the church over it.
Yeah.
And there were very few people. But at that point, I also knew I needed somebody to process this with.
Yeah.
So.
That's good. I think, well, let me speak to maybe somebody who's listening and they have maybe a different version of when we say mentoring. We didn't meet every third Thursday and do a Bible study, and you told me where you had some sort of, you missed the mark of something and we ticked off boxes.
I didn't give you a list of my sins for the previous 2 weeks.
Right. And so when we talk about like organically mentoring, there's some expectations, there's guidelines, there's rhythms, but it wasn't always the third Thursday let's meet at this
and I don't think it's ever been the same from one quote unquote mentoring session to another.
Yeah. And what I do want to say, I think we're unique. Not everybody that I mentor then becomes like part of the family.
Right.
But I wanted you to talk and us to talk because wow, if it does happen, my goodness, what? I mean, I think it was a surprise. I mean, we saw a need in each other. Let's start meeting. And then over time, now 4.5 years later, boom, it's this fantastic relationship, iron sharpening iron.
Right.
This spiritual family, I mean, physical. I mean, it just has, it started as a mentor-mentee, and it's developed into something really, really beautiful. And that's not always the expectation, but it can happen, and it did with us.
Right. And I do think because I've been around people who expect our magic to happen every time they mentored. And I'm like, that's, you can't have that expectation, or at least you have to communicate it. Like if I said to you, hey, I really want to be a part of a family, then that's a different commitment, right? So, but then I eventually did meet your family, and
now we can't get rid of her.
it's true. You all are, I think, the only people, or one of the few people who, like, I have shown up at your house unannounced. Granted, it was like a really chaotic moment.
Right.
Someday I'll show up unannounced for a good reason.
We never answered the door, but you've showed up.
I still don't understand why I don't have the password to the front door.
Yeah.
Although Libby did tell me. I just forgot. Anyway.
I don't even know what that one is, but that.
But yeah, I think of the expectation. And I remember one day you and I were meeting, and Shirley was living with you. That's Chris's mom.
Yeah.
And you'd had a particularly rough day.
Yes.
You'd been pushed to your limits, and I think you thought you had not responded the way that you should have. And I felt so honored that you would share real life with me, that it wasn't
Okay,
all
let's just be
hunky-dory.
real. I fell apart.
Right. Well, I mean, you may have been crying, but I wasn't like holding you and but I appreciate that you told me. And then, you know, I said to you, so you're just really upset that you were a human today? And
Yeah.
and then you started crying more. But because I think sometimes we're so caught up on the relationship. And when I was a therapist, I could not have those types of conversations.
Right.
It wasn't appropriate. But with a mentor and mentee, and it wasn't our first like mentoring talk where you unloaded this.
Right.
It was
That didn't happen second month in.
right.
This was after
it was
some
like
time.
2 or 3 years in.
Right.
And so I always value when mentors can be real or say, man, I've struggled with that. You know, or the first time I told you I was having some depressive thoughts, you were like, man, after Libby was born, I really struggled, and here's what helped me. Because I think too, like, the best value, this is probably for later in the podcast, but the best value that you always have brought is I felt seen and heard and safe, but I also knew you weren't going to leave me where I was at.
Leah, I had this question, but you just answered it, so I want you to say it again. So what would someone be missing out on if they've never had this kind of mentor like you're talking about?
Yeah, so I think for me, in a time in my life, I felt new to the staff. I was at that point, I think, was still having panic attacks every time I went to a staff event because I didn't really have friends on staff yet. And I didn't know who else I could trust. But for me, I knew I had this, I mean, and I have like a great mom, a good family. I could talk to them, but they didn't get it in the same way you did. And so, but I could come to your house or I could go get coffee and I could say, this is really hard and I don't know what to do. And sometimes when I wanted advice, you would give me advice, which most of the time I want advice. I'm weird in that I don't just want to be heard most of the time. I want you to help me fix it. And I always knew I was safe, and a little absurdly, because after the crying incident, we were in a group and you said, well, I have this friend and she pointed out maybe I was upset about being human. And I thought, why didn't I get any credit for that? And you're like, no, I'm just so used to privacy. And there have been times, especially after we became friends, where I would say something to Chris and it was clear he didn't know. And I thought, oh yeah, they don't talk about.
Yeah.
So.
Unless you would give her permission to share with me.
Yeah. And I think at some point I just said, Christina, I understand that you and Chris might have better things to talk about than me. I don't know what it could possibly be.
Right.
But, also, especially in a season where I was telling you some really heavy things, I was like, please feel free to tell your husband anything.
Yeah.
And, you know, eventually I said, I trust you to not tell him what's not helpful for him to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's interesting. Some of our core values, maybe that would be helpful for somebody listening, that in our relationship, confidentiality was huge. Unless you told me or unless I asked. Right. It stayed with me. Consistency, like you said, just being honest. I didn't try to fix. Right. We had healthy boundaries. what are some other core maybe things?
Yeah, I always felt safe because you always acknowledged my emotions. When I thought I was crazy, you validated my emotions to say, man, yeah, that is really heavy, or that is really hard. Or, I remember like once I said, so I don't even remember exactly what I said to you, but you got mad on my behalf. And I thought, yes, so it's more than just having a cheerleader, because the other thing is I knew I could trust you to tell me if I was wrong.
What do you mean she became angry on your behalf?
So like somebody had done something unkind to me. I don't even remember what it was, or maybe I was believing a lie about myself. And you knew you were not angry at me, but you were angry that I had been hurt. And I thought, wow, that's what I need. Or, like another time I think I was really sad or depressed and you like started tearing up. And I'm like, I'm not even crying.
Yeah.
And so I knew that you were on my side. And so, and the other thing I like about mentors is you don't have to be unbiased.
Yeah.
Like, you'd take my word for it. Now, you always brought back truth.
Yeah.
And, okay, Leah, do you think that person meant to hurt you? What do you think they actually meant?
I remember for a while talking about, okay, that was what do you think their intention was? Like, we had those kind of conversations.
Yes.
Because I wasn't always just like, oh, you can do no wrong.
Right.
But,
No.
But you said something that, go ahead.
Well, I just was thinking, like, so many people are afraid to be honest.
Oh, yeah.
But, like, honesty brings trust.
Yeah.
So I remember telling you, too, even the fact that, like, if I was at your house at 10 o'clock and you were ready to go to bed, you would say, I love you and I'm ready to go to bed. And I said...
No, she would say, I love you, but you need to get out of my house.
Well, yes.
I was embarrassed.
Yes.
That's stop.
Well, and we had a relationship where you could joke with me like that.
Yeah.
But I remember telling you, thank you. I feel so much safer knowing that you will tell me when you need me to leave. I don't have to worry about my too much, my
Yeah.
And for somebody who had struggled with that,
Sure.
I knew it wasn't true because you weren't telling me that.
Yeah. That's good.
Could you guys talk about you plan to meet so many times, all right, and you're going to talk about these topics, but the relationship is developed more naturally, organically, as you said earlier. How have you done that? Think of some opportunities or situations.
Well, I think part of it is we're in some ways really similar. So we don't take ourselves too seriously. We both have a pretty strong justice orientation. And I mean, there's probably some things. You are the best thrifter that I know. And I don't know how you haven't mentored me into being better at that. So it's like your one failing as a mentor. But I think two things, like I had to have a procedure done. And it was like just an outpatient like scope of my esophagus or something stupid. And I didn't have it. Like, I didn't want to make my mom drive 3 hours just to come help me. My sister's a teacher, so I was looking around and I was like, really, it's only Christina who can take me because you have flexible hours during the day. Anyway, so when I started realizing, oh, some of these things that I need. So
I got to see you under sedation.
Yes, actually, you also took me for a colonoscopy.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
once somebody,
let's change the subject.
Once somebody takes you for a colonoscopy, you're
There's no turning
friends.
back.
Like,
Yeah.
Well, I do remember we had purchased our house, and we were, I think some of the boxes were there, and you came over, and you helped unload boxes
steak plates.
for the kitchen,
Yeah.
and help set the kitchen up.
Yeah.
And what I loved about that, we needed the help, but it was nice to have you there. But it's also just a very natural way to bring someone into your life,
Right.
and we talked about all kinds of things while we were putting the kitchen together.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's when I met your dad, Christina. I met your mom. I met, different mom from earlier stories. But anyway, and I think that also was like, I'm really family now.
Yeah.
And then, a couple weeks later, you're having a housewarming. Nobody's left except your family and me. And it's like, okay, well, for better, for worse, I'm in.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I like the sort of life on life. I think pretty quickly we realized we didn't have to be sitting in a coffee shop. You could be folding laundry or it helps that I'm also a high quality time person. So
Yeah.
as long as we're together, I'm fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm thinking of somebody who's out there listening, especially if you're a woman who has so much to offer into somebody younger. What advice, as somebody who was looking for an older woman to come and pour into and walk alongside, what advice do you, as the younger, give them?
I love this question, especially because I remember hearing from some older women, and they just felt like they didn't have much to give.
Yeah.
And I thought, do you know how many of us are dying for you to mentor us?
Yeah.
Just who you are, your life experience. And so I would say, like, just get to know some girls, even if you aren't discipling them all. But because I also love it. So especially as a single person, if you invite me over for dinner, thank you.
Yeah.
And I notice a lot of moms who have lots of kids, or what they perceive to be lots of kids, who are in their loud stage.
Yeah.
They apologize to me all the time for how loud it is at dinner. And I always say to them, I can go back to my house and stare at a white wall and have it perfectly silent.
Yeah.
That's very easy to create.
Yeah.
But being around the chaos of family is actually really life-giving to me for a short burst of time.
Yeah.
Well, and Leah, because you're a single woman and becoming a part of the family, I wanted and needed to get to know you as well.
Right.
And so when you're in our home, looking at you as in some ways as I would my wife or one of my daughters, like, do you need a cup of coffee?
Right.
That's one way God has challenged me, is to care about some of these women that God puts into Christina's life through mentoring and make you feel known and cared about and looked after, because you're single. Your father passed away when you were very young. And that's a huge need as well, I believe.
Right. And I think too, so we have some mutual friends, and the husband gets up and makes coffee for the wife every morning. And I just thought, what a standard, you know, because so their daughter and son saw that growing up. And I'm like, whether or not the daughter's husband makes her coffee every day, she knows that, like, I am worthy of that level of service. And so I think that's the best part about when you are being mentored, when you become part of a family, is I do see how Chris treats you or your daughters. And I see, like, your playfulness, or, you know, if you have a slight disagreement or something, and it's just real life. You all don't try to put on, I don't even know if y'all are capable at this point of putting on an act in front of me. So, I mean, it's real, and I'm there. So,
Yeah, that's a good point. Just being real. Anything
yeah,
else?
I think that's that being real thing, because people think that you must have a perfect house or you can't ever have conflict. But also, you know, I will tell people I grew up in a house where emotions were either under or overexpressed.
Yeah.
So even watching people have conflict and draw closer together is really beneficial for me. So I'm like, I actually have no interest in people who are perfect or trying to be perfect.
Yeah, let's clarify that. No one exists. That's perfect.
Right. Well, but you all don't even really try, which for me is like the greatest sign of I'm in the family, they love me, because
it's actually exhausting to try to try to be perfect and give that impression. And that's why we call it real life mentoring.
Right.
We're going to put it on the table. We're going to have confidence together, because trust will be built.
Right.
And it can continue to develop because of that.
Right.
Well, and I think this is what I thought about earlier, is Chris often says, for him, mentoring, you mentor somebody, you're walking alongside them. And let me just preface this. Let me back up first. Sometimes I've just mentored girls for seasons. You know, like, we're going to meet for 6 weeks. We're going to walk through a specific issue.
You mean they haven't all been 4.5 years?
Right. But when it gets to what we have developed, it's walking through the good and the bad and the ugly. It's walking through everything. And it's really the bad and the ugly that has made it so sweet now at this end. Yeah.
When I think about mentoring and the power of it, I think about a year ago, I was not in a good place mentally or emotionally. And at moments where I didn't feel like I could trust myself to make the right decision, because just I was so confused and the enemy was lying to me. And I didn't feel like I could always trust myself.
Yeah.
But I knew I could trust you. And so when in doubt, I did what Christina said. And it was a very short season. It's, no longer do I just blanketly follow. And you weren't telling me a lot of things,
Right.
but I knew if you said it, you believed it was for my benefit, and it probably was going to help. So
Talk about, because we just assume people know that part of our relationship is there's a spiritual aspect, and I never set myself up as like, well, Leah, you should, or I don't give you advice. You point me and I point you to scripture. We pray together. We hear the voice of the Holy Spirit together.
Right.
What is the significance of that sort of being our core?
Right. I think if I wanted advice, I could go find a therapist or something. And I think too often mentors in spiritual communities try to just have all the answers.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually really dangerous because then someday if you leave me or if you hurt me, I don't know how to go to Jesus about that. And I've seen that with friends where they're mentored into a personality, or they're mentored into trusting.
That's good. We just should have a moment of silence.
Wow.
That's so good.
Mentored into a personality.
Yeah. Mentor. So like, this is very much not Christina, but if Christina basically is making me in her image,
and short hair.
Right. I would have short spiky hair. Yeah. My house would be full of vintage things. But then when either A, I realize you're not perfect, or B, you leave, whether it's you physically move away or you just suddenly decide you don't like me, if you haven't done your job, I don't know how to take that to Jesus.
Yeah.
So even,
good. Oof.
So like we've been less than ideal at times, and we, had to be 3 or 4 months before we but the thing is, A, you're still checking in with me, but B, you know that I still know how to go to God for what I need from him. And you are there for because we all need reminders too.
Yeah.
And so, or to point me back to truth, or to point me to scripture. And something I really like too that you do is you've started, occasionally you'll just send me pictures from your journal. Not the part where you list all the people you have to forgive, but,
unless you're honest.
Right. But, what the Lord is speaking to you. And sometimes you'll know that it applies to a situation. But the other day you said, just let this land where it lands. And so for me too, just the knowing that, but my greatest love language is that somebody thought about me when they weren't with me and they did something about it. So yeah, I think we put so much pressure on ourselves as mentors, but it's so much more helpful if you don't have all the right answers, because I don't actually need the answers. I need to learn how to find them.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
We're going to wrap up.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I don't need all the answers. I need to know where to find them, how to find them.
Yeah, it's the same, we say teach a man to fish, but then somehow when it comes to mentoring, we think we have to just keep handing them buckets of fish. And I'm like, no, you show them where the best fishing spots are. You show them how to
use their fishing
load a
rod.
pole, or whatever you call that.
Load a pole.
Load a pole. String a pole. I don't know. What do you do to a pole?
Change the
It
subject.
has something to do with a worm. I don't know.
Right, but if I give them all if I give them tools that they can translate, and I teach, you teach them how to Google or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's more manageable.
Well, and just so I love the advice that you gave. I hope that if you've listened and you're not mentoring somebody, does it always end up in a relationship I have with Leah? No, but boy, when it does, it's really a sweet, sweet, sweet gift.
I mean, I could tell you plenty of mentoring disasters I have.
Yeah.
I had a person become an atheist after I mentored.
Well, that's a whole other podcast.
Another episode.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for listening. Leah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being a part of today.
You're welcome.
We want to thank you as always for listening. If today was helpful, if something that you listened to was helpful, we would really love it if you would go to Apple or Spotify, leave us a review, download, subscribe, and for all things related to podcast, if you'd like to give a financial contribution to help us continuing bringing this sort of broadcasting to you, just go to FahrenheitMentoring.org.
Hi, this is Chris Corral, producer of the Fahrenheit Real Life Mentoring Podcast. This podcast is produced through a partnership with the Confetti Corral Boutique and Michelle Corral Realtor. To find out more about these businesses who support our vision and ministry, go to confetticorral.com or find them on Facebook.